Let's turn to Tesla again. I'd like to ask you about your ambitions for the future. You've said you want the company to be able to make 20 million cars a year by 2030, which would make it the same size as Toyota and Volkswagen combined today. Give us a sense. What does the business look like by 2030 to make 20 million cars? Plants, footprints, models.
Yes, well, this is not a forum for announcing new product, new Tesla products. The 20 million by 2030 is an aspiration, not a promise. And the reason for aiming for something like that is there are approximately 2 billion cars and trucks in the world. And for us to really make a dent in sustainable energy and electrification, I think we need to replace at least 1% of the fleet per year to really be meaningful. And that's where the 20 million units comes from. Let's try to replace 1% of the global fleet of 2 billion cars and trucks per year. That's our aspiration. It's not a promise, it's an aspiration. I think we've got a good chance of getting there. And people will see, based on the products that we unveil, will be able to judge for themselves whether that goal is realistic or not. We have an incredible team at Tesla and executing very well. And our annual growth rates are faster than any large manufactured product in the history of Earth. I think the next fastest was the growth of the Model T, and we're faster than the Model T. So, you know, if that growth rate continues, then obviously we will reach 20 million vehicles a year. But we may stumble and not reach that goal. So, but I'd say on roughly, it's roughly equally difficult to have gotten to this point as it will be to get to 20 million.
And what's the biggest uncertainty with getting to 2030? Is it manufacturing ramping? Is it the raw materials? Is it something else?
There are some raw material constraints that we see coming in lithium production, probably in about 3 years, and in cathode production. The two main cathode choices are nickel and iron phosphate. Obviously, iron is extremely plentiful. The Earth is 32% iron by composition. So if a little bit of trivia, if someone says, what is Earth made of? The single biggest element that Earth is made of is iron. The second biggest element that Earth is made of is oxygen, which is about 30% of Earth mass. So clearly iron's not in short supply. The phosphate is slightly more of a challenge, but still quite common. So I do not see any fundamental scaling constraints. And lithium is also quite common. So lithium is practically everywhere. So this is not a question of a shortage of like, as though it's some rare element. It's really just that the lithium mining and especially the refining capacity and that of taking iron and phosphorus and turning it into battery grade iron phosphate or nickel and turning it into battery grade nickel it's really the equipment. I think the single biggest constraint would be the equipment necessary to convert the ore into battery grade materials. Yes, I think you're sort of putting too much emphasis on those 20 million vehicles by 2030 as though this is some grand promise, some hill upon which we will die. It is simply an aspiration, and we may achieve it or we may not. Our goal is to accelerate the advent of sustainable energy, and so that's why we want to make a lot of cars and also a lot of stationary battery packs, because the three pillars of a sustainable energy future are electric transport, stationary battery packs, and solar and wind, and geothermal and hydro, basically sustainable energy sources. But solar and wind particularly are intermittent. And so you need stationary battery packs to store the energy when the sun doesn't shine.
Do you think Tesla has succeeded in its goal then? Or do you think there's still much more to do?
No, I think that we've not succeeded in the goal. If you consider the goal to be getting the automotive industry to move strongly towards electric vehicles, I think that part of the goal we have succeeded in. That was explicitly part of our goal, is to get the industry moving towards electric vehicles, because they were doing nothing in that direction when we started. And for the longest time, they were dismissing the concept of electric vehicles. And then Tesla started taking market share away from them, and that changed their mind.
How long do you think you're likely to stay at Tesla?
As long as that can be useful.
And what else is there in terms of potential future projects that piques your interest? You're obviously going to be quite involved in Twitter if the deal goes through, but you've got Tesla, you've got SpaceX, you've got Boring, you've got Neuralink. As you're looking around thinking you potentially have capacity, what else is there in terms of the kind of, I don't know, betterment of the human condition or improving Earth that you feel you might want to turn your attention to in the future?
Well, I'm trying to take the set of actions that I think most likely make the future good, and hopefully not pave the road to hell with good intentions. So I think Tesla's about accelerating sustainable energy, because we obviously need a sustainable energy future on Earth for Earth to be good. Then SpaceX is about extending life beyond Earth so that we may become a multi-planetary species, and with Starlink providing internet coverage to the least served in the world.
What do you think the next goals are then for SpaceX? And do you have a date in mind for when you think they will get to Mars?
I think we should be able to, I don't know, maybe get Starship to Mars uncrewed in 3 to 5 years. And then I think if that's successful, then we may be able to send a crewed mission to Mars before the end of the decade.
Can I bring us down to earth gently and ask you about China in relation to Tesla? Where do you,
Sure.
How important is the market for you? Do you think China contributes most of your growth in the future?
No, I think China is obviously a very significant market, but it is, I'd say it's probably 25 to 30% of our market long term. The rest of the world is probably 3/4 of it.
Do you see, I promised I didn't have any more Twitter questions, but this is sort of a Twitter question. Do you see any risk at all that China uses your ownership of Twitter potentially to interfere or block Tesla's operations in the country? Because obviously China has banned Twitter.
I've seen no indication to that effect.
Okay. How close would you say you are personally to the Chinese government? Because when you set up the factory in Shanghai, the rules were rewritten around joint ventures to allow you to do that.
Well, yeah, I was certainly asked many times by the government of China to do a factory in China. I said, well, we're not going to do one which is 51% locally owned. And so if they're willing to change the rules, not just for us, but for everyone, then we would move forward. And so they did. And I think it's been very successful so far, and the government's very happy about it. And so, I don't know, things are proceeding fairly well.
How many other plants are you expecting to open in China in the near future?
Well, we're not expecting to open any additional plants in China in the near future. We will be expanding our Shanghai factory. But our focus on production is going to be on the 2 new factories that we've recently completed in Berlin and in Austin, Texas.
How hard is it as a problem to solve? Because you've made predictions in the past about autonomy, and some of those haven't come to fruition at the same time. Has your understanding of the problem of autonomy changed over the last few years?
Yes. I would say that self-driving is one of those things where there are a lot of false dawns, or where you think you're getting there, but then you end up asymptoting. Your progress is initially linear, and then looks logarithmic and sort of tapers off because you're in a local maximum that you did not realize you were in. Now, at this point, I think we are no longer trapped in a local maximum, and obviously I could be wrong, but I think we are actually quite close to achieving self-driving at a safety level that is better than human. And it appears, my best guess is that we will get there this year. But we're really not far from it. And like I said, the best way to assess this is to be in our beta program, or look at the videos of those who are in the beta program, and look at the progress that has occurred. And the progress is dramatic. And I'm confident we will not merely get to the safety level of a human, we will get far in excess of the safety level of a human. So I think ultimately probably a factor of 10 is safer than a human as measured by the probability of injury.
Now, given where you're trying to get to with this, the factor above human driving, the potential lives that could be saved with that, I need to ask you about some of the accidents and fatalities that have happened with vehicles previously. The people who died, do you consider that that was a price worth paying to get to the level where we want to be to save more human lives in the future?
Well, it is important to note that, and we have never said ever that the Tesla autopilot does not require attention. We have always made that extremely clear, repeatedly. You can't even turn it on without acknowledging that it requires supervision. We remind you of that every time you turn it on to ad nauseum. So this was not a case of setting expectations that the car could simply drive itself in the past and then not meeting those expectations. That is completely untrue. Now, it is also the case, however, and I knew this would be true from the beginning, that people don't, the people whose lives are saved with autopilot or autonomy don't know that their lives were saved. And so, if you look at, say, deaths, annual automotive deaths every year, it's about around 1 million people per year die from automotive accidents. Maybe 10 million per year are severely injured. And so with autonomy, the car's, driving, or it's assisted driving right now, but it will be fully autonomous in the future. Like I said, those who didn't realize they would have crashed or hit a pedestrian or a cyclist, they don't know that. So basically, even if you let's say save 90% of the people that would otherwise have died, the remaining 10% who did die will still sue you. Now, but I think you have to say, like, in the grand scheme of things, what is the morally right decision? And I'm a strong believer in doing the reality of good over the perception of good. And I have utter contempt for those who prefer the perception of good over the reality of it. And so we're just going to take the heat. But if we believe that that the probability of injury is reduced, and are very confident of that, but we also know that we're going to be sued despite doing the right thing, we will do the right thing and get sued.
What is Tesla's approach to smaller and more affordable end of the market? You're going to go smaller than the Model 3, but could you get into a scooter, micromobility, something else?
Scooters are very dangerous. I would not recommend anyone drive a scooter. If there's ever an argument between a scooter and a car, the scooter will lose.